In this section, I'd like to talk a little bit about the different types of levels of license that are available to you as a mariner, as well as the tests that you're going to be expected to take and the knowledge requirements that you have to have fulfilled before you get your license. So the three main licenses that a majority of you might be going for are what's called, number one, an operator of uninspected passenger vessels, otherwise known as a six-pack license. This allows you to take out six paying passengers on various size vessels in various waters. More on that in just a second. The second license is a master of up to 100 gross tons for inland and Great Lakes waters. And then the third license is master 100 tons near coastal. Majority of people are going to fall into one of these three categories, although there are other categories as well. In terms of tonnage, when I talk about that, that's the gross registered tonnage of the vessel. So whatever it says on the vessel's registration is going to be the tonnage. Now, although these license levels may say up to 100 gross tons, you can still get other licenses underneath them. For instance, your license might be limited to 25 tons. Even though you've met the requirements for 100 tons. So the goal is to go for as much as you possibly can, and then your experience is going to limit you to a certain level of license. The other thing that's interesting about this is the routes that are available, or the routes, depending on how you like to pronounce it, I guess. There are generally a few different routes. Near coastal, which is in the ocean waters out to a certain distance. Inland waters, which is inside the baseline, rivers and inland waterways, and then the Great Lakes as well. And the Great Lakes are huge, so that's why they have their own category. Like I say, there's a few other categories as well, but these are the main ones. So when we look at this kind of matrix of requirements, you're going to find yourself landing in one of these categories. And I'll just kind of talk about the main highlights. You can pause the video, or this presentation is available to download if you want as well. But for the operator of uninspected passenger vessel, otherwise known as OUPV, we need to be 18 years old, and you need 360 days of sea time with 90 on the route that you're going to get certified on. So for instance, say you have 360 days in a river, but you also have 90 of those days is out on near coastal waters, fishing, or whatever reason, you're going to qualify for a near coastal license. If it's on the Great Lakes, likewise, you'll qualify for that license. So 360 days of sea time documented on your sea service forms, or from an employer, or some other method to document your sea time. How much of that tonnage is required on certain levels of size boats? None. There's no minimum requirement for the tonnage for an OUPV vessel. The other thing about OUPV vessels is that these can really be pretty small vessels. So a majority of people are going to qualify these once they reach 360 days on some type of boat that they can document. The next license level is the Master 100 Tons Inland and Great Lakes. The minimum age for this is 19 years old, and you need 360 total days of sea time. But 90 of those days has to be on the certain route that you're going for, near coastal, inland, or lakes. And then there's some tonnage requirements as well. So if you're going to qualify for a 100-ton master license, you need at least 90 days on vessels greater than 51 tons. If you don't have that, you'll be limited to 50 tons. And if you don't have 90 days above 26 tons, you'll be limited to 25 tons, kind of thing. And so these different tonnage requirements are not meant to segregate you in any way. It's just to limit you based on your experience. So for instance, it's conceivable if you've been cruising around on your boat, and say it's a 10-ton boat, and you've got 360 days on it, you could qualify as a master 100 tons inland and Great Lakes, limited to 25 tons is what they were going to say for that. Likewise, for the master near coastal, there's additional sea time. We need 720 days, which is 2 years out on the water. And everything is basically doubled for the inland and Great Lakes waters. So if you've got over 180 days on a tonnage greater than 51, you're going to end up with a master near coastal. But if you've been cruising around on a smaller boat, you can still qualify master 100 tons, just limited to 25 tons is the way that they're going to phrase it. For all three of these licenses, you do need 90 days of sea time within the previous 3 years, which is proving your recency to make sure that you're not documenting or you're not going to get your captain's license having never been on the water in the past 20 years, for instance. So you need 90 days on recent sea time. And then there's a couple endorsements you can get as well. You can get an auxiliary sail or an assistance towing endorsement by passing an additional test or sitting through an additional course. All of the licenses are available for assistance towing. There's nothing on the checklist for auxiliary sail for OUPV, but for the master licenses, if you've got 180 days for the inland or 360 days for the near coastal on sail or auxiliary sail equipped vessels, you can qualify for a sailing endorsement as well. Why would you want these? Well, the commercial assistance towing allows you to take money for towing or providing salvage services to anybody. And the auxiliary sail allows you to work on auxiliary or sail vessels. Finally, everybody needs a first aid CPR course. Before you go and take one, be sure that it's at a licensed provider, such as the Red Cross. The next thing we'll talk about is the examination requirements for these different licenses. And so I talked a little bit in the intro about rules of the road, deck general, deck safety, nav general, and nav problems, otherwise known as chart plotting, for instance. And generally, you're going to find you have to answer questions in all of these categories. There's some specific cases, like for the OUPV license, you don't have a deck general or a deck safety exam. You have a combined deck general and deck safety exam. Likewise, for the master licenses, you've got the standard 5 tests plus an additional test, which is a combination based on your route, whether it's for the inland specific questions or for the near coastal specific questions. So these are the things you're going to want to study for. And what I recommend you do is just make a checklist. Study rules of the road until you're competent in it. Practice these sample exams. And so you see the letters Q100, that's the module that will be listed on your exam testing letter when the time comes. So you can look on the internet for sample exams, or I've included some in the course as well for these different modules. So you can look at those and take those practice exams. Finally, there's what's required to know for each of the exams that you're going to take. And this is a really busy slide, so it's going to be something you're going to want to download and just look at your specific case for. But first of all, you're going to want to figure out what license you're going for. So let's say we're going for an OUPV near coastal license. That's going to put us in category 5. Category 5. So as we go through the next matrix, we're going to look in the category 5 column for all the required knowledge that we have. And like I say, you can come back and refer to this later. You can put the video on slow motion if you want, or look at the downloaded version. So the first topics is going to be regarding navigation, position, and determination. So for category 5, right in here, all we need to know is piloting type stuff. We don't need to know any celestial navigation, which is great, any of this kind of stuff, right? But for some license levels, for instance, the 100-ton master needs to know how to do this latitude by meridian passage of the sun if you're going for an oceans level endorsement, which is generally nobody, because that starts at around 200 tons kind of thing, right? So what we can do is just kind of look at each of these different slides and see the knowledge requirements. Meteorology and oceanography, we have to know vessel handling and maneuvering, but only certain characteristics of it, right? We don't need to know anything about approaching a pilot vessel on station, but we do need to know about handling in rivers and estuaries kind of thing. The next categories is stability and construction and damage control. Not a lot there to know for our OUPV license, just small vessel engine operations and maintenance. No cargo handling or stowing on our mythical exam. No dangerous goods, international maritime stuff. But when we get to fire drills, we have to know about the chemistry and classes of fire, basic fire prevention, as well as all the kind of collision and damage control stuff that we might need on a vessel. Moving along, we also have to know about man overboard procedures or person overboard procedures and towing. And then we don't need to know anything about maritime law internationally, but we do need to know about national maritime law for the certification and documentation of vessels. Continuing along, we have to know about the rules and regulations for uninspected vessels and pollution prevention. We have to know about how to ship and discharge seamen. We need to know about sanitation and pollution, hot work, safety, and some categories of ship's business as well. And then finally, just life-saving, survival at sea, life-saving operations, and then auxiliary sail vessels. So you can see there's different numbers that correspond to different license levels. And I'm just going to zoom right back up, so don't get seasick when I scroll up here real quick. We'll go back here. really what we want to do is just pick your license category that you're going for. So say you were going for master, less than 200 tons, which includes the 100 ton stuff. You're in category 4. So if we proceed through all those, we've got to know all these different topics for our license examination level. So where can you find resources to study for these things? Well, I think if you make a checklist of what you need to know and you look in some of the standard deck references, which is included as a resource in this lesson, you can see what the standard deck library is, and maybe you want to borrow or buy a couple of those books and study from them. Maybe you already have them, kind of thing. That'll help guide your knowledge. But I think most predominantly what we're going to want to do is focus on the practice exams. So look at what the practice exams are. Realize that you generally only need a 70% on them for most exams. For 90% is for rules of the road and chart plotting. And just keep practicing example problems until you feel confident. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go through each of those 5 main topics, and we'll talk about, what they generally mean, as well as give you a little sample lecture from a course, that gives you a flavor of what to expect. Inside each of those modules, the different lectures, deck general, deck safety, deck or navigation general, chart plotting, and rules of the road, there's downloadable materials. So don't be afraid to download those and use them in your studying. Those include sample examinations, databank questions from the Coast Guard, publications, references, all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff in there to take advantage of. Okay, let's get started.